In the cold silence of the Montana woods, a lonely veteran thought his life was over until a dying police officer collapsed at his door one stormy night. What began as a rescue turned into a deadly chase, uncovering a secret printing company hiding something far darker than anyone imagined. With only his loyal German shepherd by his side, he fought through bullets, betrayal, and faith itself to protect a truth worth dying for. Stay with us till the end. This story will touch your heart and remind you that miracles still happen. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And may God bless you always. The rain had been falling for hours, soaking through the thick canopy of pines that blanketed the Montana wilderness. The world was silver and black, mist coiling between the trees, thunder rolling like distant artillery. The narrow dirt road winding through the forest was empty except for a single cabin light flickering miles away. Inside that cabin lived Jack Miller, a 43-year-old veteran who had long since chosen silence over society. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face weathered by war and mountain winters. Faint scars ran along his jawline, and his short brown hair was streaked with gray at the temples. A week-old beard shaded his cheeks, making him look perpetually tired, or maybe just done with the world. His eyes, steel gray, steady, were those of a man who had seen too much and spoken too little. He had once served in the U.S. Army's 10th Mountain Division, but after losing 2 friends to an ambush overseas, Jack had left the city life behind, retreating to a cabin near Flathead Forest with his only companion, Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd. Rex was large, muscular, with a sable coat glistening even in the dim firelight. His amber eyes watched everything, alert and intelligent. Jack had trained him from a pup, obedient, loyal, and fearless. The two shared a rhythm of quiet days filled with wood chopping, long walks by the river, and the kind of silence that only men who've survived war can understand. Tonight, though, the calm shattered when Rex's ears perked up and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Jack froze, the sound cutting through the rain, a sharp, distant crack, another, gunshots. His instincts fired instantly. He grabbed the flashlight, his rifle, and motioned for Rex. "Let's go, boy," he muttered. The dog bounded ahead, nose to the wind, guiding him through the slick underbrush. The rain came harder now, slicing through the beam of his light. After 10 minutes of hiking, Jack spotted a faint orange glow reflecting off the puddles. A car fire. A patrol car lay on its side near the bend of the muddy road, its roof crumpled, tires still spinning weakly. The badge on the door read, "Montana Highway Patrol." Jack's pulse quickened as he approached. Through the cracked windshield he saw movement. Someone inside trying to crawl out. She was a woman, mid-30s, drenched in blood and rain. Her uniform was torn, her badge hanging by a thread. Officer Laura Hayes was tall and lean, maybe 5'8", with chestnut brown hair matted to her face and a thin streak of dirt across her freckled cheek. Despite the pain, her expression was fierce. She had the determined eyes of someone who refused to die easily. Jack smashed the glass and pulled open the door. "Easy, officer. You're gonna be all right." Her lips trembled as she looked up. They're coming." Jack's gaze shot down the road. Faint headlights bobbed through the rain. Whoever they were close. He reached under her arm, hauling her up with the practiced efficiency of a soldier. Blood soaked through her side. She winced, but didn't scream. "Rex, watch!" he commanded. The dog circled them, growling low, eyes glowing under the lightning flash. They stumbled away from the wreck, just as a pickup truck screeched to a stop behind them. Doors slammed. Voices shouted over the storm. Jack pushed Laura behind a fallen log. He peeked through the rain. 3 men, all armed. Their flashlights cut the darkness. One of them yelled, "Find her! She's got the files!" Jack's heart tightened. Files? He didn't have time to think. "Stay down," he whispered to Laura, then turned to Rex. "Quiet approach." The dog darted through the shadows, disappearing behind the wreck. Moments later came a yelp of pain, a man's scream. Gunfire erupted wildly toward the trees. Jack took the distraction, fired once, hitting the second attacker in the leg. The third spun around in panic. Lightning lit the forest as Rex lunged out of nowhere, slamming into him, teeth sinking into his arm. The man's gun clattered into the mud. Jack stepped forward, rifle steady, voice cold. "Walk away if you want to live." The wounded men scrambled into the truck, tires spinning as they retreated into the rain. Jack waited until their taillights vanished into the trees, then turned back. Laura lay against the log, clutching her side, pale but conscious. He knelt beside her, assessing the wound. A deep graze, bleeding heavily. "You're lucky," he muttered. "Another inch, and that bullet would have taken your lung." I need to contact the station," she said weakly. "They think I'm dead." "No radio out here," Jack replied, pressing gauze from his pack against her wound. "You'll have to rest." "I can't," Laura insisted, trying to sit up. "They'll come back. They work for Franklin Paper Company. It's not a printing firm. They're making counterfeit bills, millions. I was undercover. They found out." Her breath hitched. The pain was breaking through her discipline. Jack met her eyes. For a moment, he saw the same fire he'd once seen in his own reflection. Someone too stubborn to give up, even when bleeding. "Then you're safe here. I'll get you to my cabin. You'll be hidden till sunrise." He lifted her gently, careful not to aggravate the wound. Rex trotted beside them, ever watchful. The hike back felt longer than before. The mud deep, the rain endless. Twice Jack stopped to rest, his breath fogging in the cold air. Laura murmured something about her partner, about betrayal, then drifted into unconsciousness. By the time they reached the cabin, dawn was a faint bruise on the horizon. Jack laid her on the couch near the fire, covering her with a wool blanket. Rex sat near the door, ears flicking toward the wind outside. Jack cleaned the wound, stitched it carefully, then poured a small measure of whiskey into a tin cup. 1 sip for her, 1 for himself. When Laura stirred awake, her eyes scanned the rustic room. Wood walls lined with hunting gear, the faint scent of pine and smoke. "Where am I?" she whispered. "My place," Jack said, tightening the last bandage. "You'll be safe here." She looked at him, exhaustion giving way to faint gratitude. "Why help me?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He just looked into the flames. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it." Thunder echoed again, far away now. Rex shifted, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. Jack rose, rifle in hand, stepping to the window. Far through the trees, 2 sets of headlights flickered for an instant before vanishing. He exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. "They're still out there," he muttered. And as the rain eased into a steady drizzle, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Inside the small cabin, 3 survivors, 1 scarred man, 1 wounded cop, and 1 loyal dog, waited for whatever the next night would bring. Rain still whispered against the window panes when Officer Laura Hayes awoke, her head heavy and body weak. The room smelled of pine, smoke, and antiseptic. The crackling fireplace painted the walls in orange light, revealing a simple cabin, handmade furniture, military gear neatly arranged, a rifle leaning by the door. On a nearby chair sat Jack Miller, the man who had saved her, his elbows resting on his knees, gaze fixed on the flames. His rugged face was unreadable, carved by years of hardship and quiet regret. He looked like a man who no longer expected peace but still guarded it fiercely. Near the door, Rex, the German shepherd, lay alert, his golden eyes following every sound beyond the walls. His right ear twitched at the faint creak of wood. He looked calm but ready, as if danger might return at any moment. Laura tried to sit up, a gasp escaping her lips as pain flared through her side. Jack was beside her in 2 steps, steady hands pressing gently on her shoulder. "Easy. You lost a lot of blood," he said quietly. His voice carried the low tone of command, one honed by years in uniform. She noticed his rough hands, a faint tremor in one finger, something soldiers carried long after the war. "How long was I out?" she asked. "A few hours," Jack replied, handing her a tin cup of water. "You talked in your sleep. Something about Franklin paper." Laura's expression hardened. "It's not what people think it is," she whispered. "It's a cover. They print counterfeit money, so real that even banks can't tell. I was investigating for months. Someone inside the department tipped them off. They came after me before I could report it." Her words trembled between fatigue and frustration. Jack studied her carefully. "And you thought you could take on a whole syndicate alone?" he asked. She gave a faint smile despite the pain. "I didn't have a choice." Rex rose, padding closer to the door. His hackles lifted, a low growl building in his chest. Jack moved silently to the window, peering through a small crack in the curtain. Nothing but trees swaying under the storm. Still, instinct told him they weren't alone. He reached for his rifle and nodded at Rex. The dog relaxed but didn't return to his place. He sat by the door like a soldier standing guard. Laura watched them both and said softly, "You trained him well." Jack's eyes softened. "Rex trained me more than I trained him." She caught the faint trace of warmth in his tone. "He was a rescue," Jack continued after a pause. "Came to me when I was still figuring out how to live without a unit. We saved each other, I guess." Lightning flashed, and for a moment, Laura saw a family photo nailed above the fireplace. A younger Jack in uniform with 2 other soldiers, all smiling. The edges of the picture were singed, one corner blackened by smoke. She understood enough not to ask. A knock startled them both. A single, hesitant tap at the door. Jack lifted his rifle slightly. Who the hell would... Before he could finish, a voice called out, muffled by the rain. "Jack, it's me, Harold." Jack frowned, lowering the weapon slightly. He opened the door a crack to reveal Harold Green, a man in his late 50s, the local mail carrier who sometimes brought Jack supplies from town. Harold was a stocky man with thinning hair and a round, friendly face now dripping wet under the storm. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from nerves. "You got strangers up here, Jack? Folks asking questions down in Kalispell. Men in black trucks, said they're with the Treasury Department. Didn't look like government to me." Jack's jaw tightened. "Thanks for the warning," he said curtly. Harold glanced past him, spotting Laura on the couch. His eyes widened. "You didn't tell me you had company." Jack blocked the view slightly. "She's hurt. Hit a deer on the road." Harold nodded, clearly unconvinced but wise enough not to push. "All right. You just, be careful." He tipped his hat and trudged back into the rain, Jack shut the door and locked it. Laura stared at him. "They're already looking for me," she said. "Those men aren't going to stop." Jack placed his rifle back on the wall. "Then they'll have to get through me first." Silence settled again, broken only by the rain. Laura leaned back against the pillow, her eyelids heavy. She felt oddly safe, as though this stranger's quiet strength had built invisible walls around the cabin. "Why are you helping me, Jack?" she asked drowsily. He hesitated, eyes distant. "Because once, I watched someone die when I could have done something. I swore it wouldn't happen again." Rex lay down by her side, resting his head on his paws, eyes still glowing in the dim light. Laura reached out weakly, her fingers brushing the dog's fur. "Good boy," she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley like a warning. Inside, 3 lives, bound by chance, fear, and fragile trust, prepared for the long night ahead. By dusk, the storm had turned to snow. Thick flakes drifted through the pine branches, muffling every sound. The Montana wilderness, once wet and loud, now lay buried in white silence. Inside the cabin, Jack Miller moved with quiet urgency, checking his weapons and setting up a line of traps around the perimeter. His eyes were sharp, scanning every corner like a soldier preparing for a siege. The scar on his jaw caught the firelight as he tightened the strap of his rifle. Rex, his German shepherd, followed close behind, tail low but alert, sniffing the cold air that leaked through the cracks in the door. The dog's wound from the night before, a small cut on his flank, had already been cleaned, but Jack noticed the slight limp when Rex shifted his weight. Officer Laura Hayes sat by the fire, her bandaged side aching as she loaded her pistol. Her face was pale against the glow, strands of chestnut hair sticking to her cheek. The fear in her eyes wasn't for herself, but for what might happen to the man and dog protecting her. "You think they'll find us out here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded grimly. "They've got resources. They'll find this place eventually. The question is when." Outside, the snow fell harder, covering footprints and paths. Jack placed small metal snares near the tree line, then a tripwire tied to an old flare gun. He worked methodically, movements practiced and silent, honed by years of patrol in foreign deserts and mountains. When he came back inside, Rex trotted behind him, shaking snow from his fur. "They'll come from the south," Jack said. "That's where the road ends." Laura looked at him for a long moment. "You've done this before," she said softly. "Too many times," Jack answered, his eyes distant. Hours passed, the fire burned low. Then Rex's ears twitched, a faint crunch, snow under boots. Jack moved to the window. Through the white haze, he saw faint figures, 3, maybe 4, approaching the clearing, their flashlights cutting pale circles in the snow. "They're here," Jack murmured. He motioned for Laura to get behind the wooden counter. "If they breach the door, go through the back and up the ridge. Rex will guide you." The first shot shattered the night, a bullet slamming into the window frame. Glass exploded across the room. Jack ducked, firing back twice, the recoil shaking his shoulder. One shadow fell. 2 more pressed forward. The cabin's wooden walls groaned under the assault of gunfire. Rex barked sharply, muscles tensed, waiting for Jack's signal. "Now!" Jack yelled. The dog shot out the door like a streak of smoke, circling behind the attackers. A scream echoed through the trees as Rex leapt onto one man, driving him into the snow. Laura crawled toward the back door, wincing with every movement. She reached the storage room, grabbed a lantern, and glanced back. Jack was still firing, calm under pressure. She saw a glimpse of his face, Focused, determined, unflinching. The kind of man who accepted death as part of his duty. Then another gunshot. Outside, a fourth man appeared from behind a pine, taking aim at Jack through the window. Laura raised her pistol, firing instinctively. The man dropped, the sound drowned by the wind. "Go!" Jack shouted, reloading. "Get to the ridge!" She hesitated, but Rex appeared at her side, panting, his fur streaked with blood from a gash on his shoulder. The sight froze her for a second. "Rex, no," she whispered, tears already stinging her eyes. The dog nudged her leg, urging her toward the back door. Jack threw a flash grenade out the front. Light and sound burst through the clearing, disorienting the remaining gunmen. He sprinted to the back door, grabbing Laura's arm. Together they ran into the forest, snow crunching under their boots. The climb up the ridge was brutal. The storm thickened, wind slapping their faces, breath fogging in the freezing air. Behind them, faint shouts echoed, searchlights sweeping through the trees. Jack half-carried Laura up the slope while Rex limped beside them, his paw leaving small drops of blood on the snow. They didn't stop until the sounds vanished completely into the distance. At last, they found shelter beneath a cluster of rocks. Jack tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it against Rex's wound. The dog whimpered, but didn't resist. Laura knelt beside them, hands trembling as she helped tie the makeshift bandage. "He saved my life," she whispered, stroking Rex's head. "He'd do it again," Jack said quietly. The wind howled over the ridge. Laura looked at Jack, his face covered in snow, his eyes steady even in exhaustion. "You could have left me," she said. "You didn't have to do this." Jack met her gaze. "I've left enough people behind." She smiled weakly, tears mixing with the snow on her cheeks. "You're a hero, Jack." He shook his head. Heroes don't hide in the woods. But when Rex rested his head on Jack's knee and the snow began to settle into silence, even Jack couldn't deny the strange peace that came with saving someone again. For the first time in years, he felt purpose in the storm. The storm had cleared by dawn, leaving a hard crust of snow glittering under the pale Montana sun. The forest lay silent, but inside a makeshift shelter beneath a rocky ridge, Jack Miller, Officer Laura Hayes, and Rex were already awake. Rex's shoulder was bandaged, the fur shaved in a small patch where blood had clotted. The dog limped slightly, but wagged his tail when Jack checked the wound. Laura, though still weak, had the determined look of someone who had made up her mind. "I can't run anymore," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "I need to finish this." Jack looked up from cleaning his rifle. "Finish what?" "Franklin paper," she said. "If I can get inside, record their presses, their vault, their faces, it's enough to take them down." Jack stared at her. "That factory's a fortress. You go back, you won't walk out." Laura met his eyes, steady and calm. "Then you'll have to make sure I do." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jack nodded. "All right, we end it tonight." By evening, the three of them had descended the ridge, moving through the forest toward the valley where the Franklin Paper Company sat, an isolated industrial complex of steel buildings surrounded by fencing and floodlights. The air reeked faintly of oil and ink. From a distance, it looked harmless, a legitimate business working overtime. But as they crouched behind an old billboard, Laura pointed toward the main gate. "Those guards," she whispered. "They're not employees." Through binoculars, Jack saw what she meant. 4 men in tactical coats, their weapons concealed but visible to trained eyes. He recognized that kind of discipline. "Mercenaries," he muttered. "Not amateurs." He studied the layout: 2 guard posts, a parking lot, and a rear loading bay that led underground. That's where Laura said the printing line was hidden. "We go in quiet," Jack said. "You get your footage, I'll create noise if things go south." Rex crouched low beside them, eyes glowing in the dim light. Despite his limp, his focus was sharp, ears twitching at the faintest sound. Jack gave the signal, and they moved. They slipped through the trees, past the fence where Jack used wire cutters to slice a hole big enough for them to crawl through. The cold metal stung his hands, bringing back memories of old missions overseas. Same tension, same smell of fear before the break. They reached the loading dock unnoticed. Laura knelt beside the lock, pulling out a small toolkit from her jacket. "Where'd you learn that?" Jack whispered. "Undercover work," she replied with a faint smirk. "Not all cops get to wear uniforms." The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside. The warehouse beyond was half lit, filled with pallets of paper rolls and printing plates. The hum of machinery came from below, a faint, rhythmic thrum like a heartbeat. Laura pulled out a small camera from her vest, the lens no bigger than a coin. "Evidence," she murmured. Jack covered her flank, scanning every corner. When they reached a metal staircase, Laura motioned down. The basement was enormous, rows of industrial presses gleaming under fluorescent light, and in the middle, a man in a tailored coat supervised workers feeding blank paper into machines that printed sheets of US $100 bills. "That's him," Laura whispered. "Daniel Mercer, CEO." Jack studied the man, a tall figure in his 50s, salt and pepper hair slicked back, face lean and angular. His movements were precise, deliberate, like a man used to command. Mercer had once been a Treasury consultant before vanishing into the private sector. Greed had replaced patriotism, Jack thought grimly. Laura filmed every detail: the presses, the counterfeit bills stacked like bricks, the armed guards pacing the catwalks. But as she moved closer for a final shot, her boot scuffed a loose wrench. It clattered to the floor, echoing through the chamber. Heads turned. "Who's there?" A guard barked. "Go!" Jack hissed, firing a warning shot at the overhead lights. The room plunged into strobing chaos. Alarms blaring, red lights flashing through the smoke of gunpowder and ink mist. Rex darted forward, leaping onto a guard who tried to block their path. Jack grabbed Laura's arm, pulling her toward the staircase as bullets slammed into the railings. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and the smell of ozone filled the air. They burst through the loading door just as 2 black SUVs skidded into the yard, sirens wailing behind them. The real police. Laura turned back, panting, clutching the camera. "We've got it!" she shouted. Jack didn't answer. He was too busy reloading. Mercer appeared at the doorway, shouting to his men, but floodlights suddenly bathed the entire complex. "Federal agents!" a voice boomed. "Drop your weapons!" Jack pulled Laura behind a pile of crates, shielding her as the first exchange of gunfire erupted between the feds and Mercer's men. Rex pressed close, ears flat. "Time to move," Jack said, and they sprinted toward the fence line as chaos erupted behind them. Snow kicked up underfoot. The air burned with the scent of cordite and ink. By the time they reached the trees, the factory was engulfed in flashing lights. Laura collapsed to her knees, clutching the camera against her chest. Rex leaned against her leg, panting hard. Jack stood over them, watching the smoke rise from the valley. For the first time in years, the soldier felt something close to relief. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall pines, washing the Montana wilderness in shades of gold. A month had passed since the raid on Franklin Paper, and winter had softened into the first breath of spring. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine sap and thawing soil. In the small cabin by Flathead Forest, Jack Miller knelt beside the porch steps, repairing a broken wooden rail. His hands were rough and steady, the hands of a man who built things to last. His hair had grown longer, more silver showing at the temples, and though his face still bore the tired lines of a soldier's past, his eyes had softened. Beside him lay Rex, the German shepherd, his shoulder fully healed. The dog was sprawled in a patch of sunlight, eyes half closed, tail twitching lazily. Every now and then, he would glance toward the forest, as if expecting something, or someone. It came in the sound of tires on gravel. Jack straightened, wiping his hands on his flannel shirt. A black SUV rolled into the clearing, dust rising behind it. The door opened, and Officer Laura Hayes stepped out, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, catching the morning light. She wore plain clothes now. No badge, no uniform, just jeans, boots, and a pale blue jacket that matched the sky above. There was color in her cheeks again, the weariness replaced by a calm strength. Jack met her halfway down the path. "You found the place again," he said with a faint smile. Laura returned the smile. "Wasn't easy. The GPS gave up halfway down the road. Guess that's how you like it." "That's how I keep it quiet," Jack replied. His voice carried its usual gravelly calm, but something in his tone was lighter than before. She looked around the cabin, the smoke rising from the chimney, the neat stack of firewood, Rex's tail thumping against the porch. "It's peaceful here," she said softly. "You were right to stay." He shrugged. "Peace isn't about where you live. It's about what you've got left when everything else is gone." Laura's eyes flickered, thoughtful. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. "That's why I came." She opened it, revealing a polished silver medal, the Medal of Valor. The sunlight glinted off the engraving, for courage and sacrifice beyond duty. She held it out to him. "This was approved 2 weeks ago. You and Rex saved lives that night. I thought you should have it." Jack looked at the medal for a long moment, then at her. "You know I can't accept that." "It's not from the department," she said. "It's from me." He hesitated, then took the medal, his rough fingers brushing hers. "Then it means something." Laura smiled, then reached into her coat again and pulled out a smaller item, a brass medallion attached to a blue ribbon. She knelt beside Rex, looping it gently around his neck. "For you, partner." Rex sniffed at the medal, tail wagging. Laura laughed, the sound clear and warm. Jack leaned against the porch rail, watching them with quiet affection. "You spoil him," he said. "He earned it," she replied. They sat together on the porch steps as the morning deepened. Birds began to sing in the trees, and the air shimmered with sunlight. For a while, neither spoke. Then Laura turned to him. "I took the promotion," she said. "Washington wants me to head the Counterfeit Crimes Division. But before I go, I needed to come back, to say thank you." Jack nodded slowly. "You already did." She studied his face, rugged, calm, marked by both pain and peace. "You ever think about coming back? The world could use people like you." He gave a quiet laugh. "The world had me once. Didn't know what to do with me." He looked down at Rex, whose head rested against his boot. "We've got our post here now, guarding the quiet." Laura smiled, understanding more than words could say. Then I'll make sure the world doesn't forget what you did. Jack tilted his head toward the rising sun. Don't waste time remembering ghosts, Laura. Just keep moving forward. A soft breeze stirred through the pines, carrying the faint scent of melting snow. Laura stood, brushing off her jeans. Take care of yourself, Jack. You too, Agent Hayes, he said, deliberately using her title. She turned back once, eyes bright. It's Laura now. She climbed into her SUV, started the engine, and paused. Rex barked once as if saying goodbye. Laura smiled and waved. Goodbye, hero, she said softly, and drove off down the winding forest road. Jack watched until the car disappeared behind the trees. He looked down at Rex, who was still watching the same direction. She'll be all right, he murmured. The dog gave a short huff, as if agreeing. Jack stepped back onto the porch, the metal glinting faintly in his hand. He hung it by the window, where the sunlight touched it every morning. As the forest returned to silence, Jack sat beside Rex, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Another day, partner, he said quietly. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying the light of dawn across the mountains, soft, endless, and full of peace. Sometimes, miracles don't come with thunder or lightning. They arrive quietly, in the form of a loyal dog, a helping hand, or the courage of a stranger who refuses to walk away. In the stillness of the Montana dawn, Jack didn't just find peace. He found grace, the kind that only God can place in a man's heart after the storm. Maybe that's the same grace waiting for all of us, in every act of kindness, in every moment we choose compassion over fear. Because every time we lift someone up, we let a little bit of heaven touch the earth. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment about the miracle moments you've witnessed in your own life. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories of faith, loyalty, and hope. May God bless you, your loved ones, and every soul who still believes that light can be found, even in the darkest woods.